Yo, has this ever happened to you?
What the fuck?
Well, then you know what it's like to have been Nintendo for the last 20 years.
Up until recently, F-Zero has not had a game release since 2004 with F-Zero Climax. But that game released only in Japan, which means the West hasn't seen an F-Zero game since 2003. While Pixar would come to the rescue to fill in for the lack of awesome car-based media, it was a disappointing drought to many. Until now, with F-Zero 99 finally creating another F-Zero to technically revive the series, reinvigorating the idea that we could see a full F-Zero game soon. But it's also brought up the opposite point of view, that this proves Nintendo has no idea what to do with F-Zero, so they're making this, a recycled idea from two other games they've made instead of a new game.
So which is it? Did Nintendo finally figure out how to fix the car, or did...
First, let's understand why the F-Zero series was canceled in the first place to figure out why we got to this point. F-Zero was a series that initially started on the SNES and would follow the pretty common pattern for many Nintendo franchises of about one game per console, occasionally squeezing in two in one console. And it really didn't seem like it was going anywhere all the way up through the GameCube era.
Ah, the GameCube era, the last time Nintendo cared about all of its children.
It really seemed like F-Zero was one of the mainstay series for Nintendo. I mean, Captain Falcon was one of the most popular characters in Smash. The last mainline F-Zero, F-Zero GX, sold 1.5 million copies, which isn't amazing, but it's not a bad number on what was Nintendo's second worst selling home console. And it even got an entire anime made in 2003, the same year that it died. But despite all that, Nintendo just stopped releasing games in the F-Zero series completely out of nowhere. There was no shitty motion control F-Zero, no F-Zero game where you could use an amiibo to dress Captain Falcon as Bayonetta, not even an eye-bleed-worthy 3D high-speed racer. F-Zero only had virtual console releases and really dramatic Smash Bros. Reveals to confirm he was coming back that proved they knew how much he meant to us. Fans were left to just speculate for over a decade on what caused the series to enter this drought, and fans could not see a clear reason for this. This was not like any other seemingly dead Nintendo franchise at the time. They all seemed to have some reason for going dormant, except for maybe Star Fox, but that at least had a couple attempts made at revival. The fans' confusion would continue until Miyamoto would eventually give an interview with Smosh Games that stated they didn't really have any good ideas for new F-Zero games, and if a new controller presented a new idea, we could see a new game.
What do you mean the Wii didn't present any new ideas for an F-Zero game?
Sony straight up made sex game mechanics in Wii Dare. Why couldn't you come up with any ideas for a Wii F-Zero? It didn't make perfect sense to fans, but it was the best they had. So fans just had to hope that Nintendo would come up with a new idea, and in 2015, it seemed like they might have one. There was a rumor that Nintendo approached Criterion Games with an idea for a new F-Zero game. Criterion Games couldn't take it at the time, but this still made fans think that they finally had an idea for a new F-Zero on the Wii U. But the rumor was later proven untrue. It was just some junior Nintendo executive or something who sent one email one time that went nowhere. So those hopes were dashed away, and it was back to radio silence. Until finally, in 2023, a former Nintendo artist, Takaya Imamura, stated in an interview what I think Miyamoto's interview answer was missing that makes the length of the series' dormancy finally make sense.
The plumber has a driver's license.
Takaya stated that Mario Kart is just a bigger racing series than F-Zero, and Mario Kart takes up too much market space. Mario Kart is just bigger than F-Zero. Theoretically, an F-Zero is a waste of time when everybody already has the racing game of choice on any given Nintendo console. Which brings us to modern day, where the two main reasons that we have for the lack of an F-Zero game being the lack of new ideas and the lack of space in the market next to Mario Kart. So now, let's get into it. Is it possible that the release of F-Zero 99 is enough to get around these issues?
Well, there's the problem. You see that Mario Kart's not supposed to be there. It's all out of whack. It's all out of whack. And the creativity is so low. Look at it. Look at it. It is not supposed to be this low. This is not. There's just nothing left.
First, we'll go over the arguments that we will get more F-Zero games, and then the arguments that we won't, and then put them up against each other to see which is stronger. We'll start with some of the smaller arguments for getting more F-Zero games. First of all, this is proof that Nintendo is aware of the demand for F-Zero, picking this game over many other retro games that would theoretically be great for the 99 series. Games like Ice Climber, Dr. Mario, Night Trap, and so many other classic games would be great for the series, but they did pick F-Zero. Maybe F-Zero 99 really was was the best option in Nintendo's eyes, but you can't convince me a balloon fight battle royale would not be the best option. Another small thing is that the Mario Kart DLC is ending soon, so that could mean they'd want more new racing style games to fill in for this upcoming gap. However, there is no Nintendo game that has legs quite like Mario Kart, so Mario Kart would still likely cannibalize a new F-Zero game's sales to some extent. Neither of these are super sound arguments, but the main argument for this is that this has gotta be them testing the waters to see if there's still interest for the F-Zero series. It seems like they released this to make sure it's not just a vocal minority that wants F-Zero, but people actually want to play F-Zero games. They're hoping they could see a significant number of console owners with both an F-Zero and a Mario Kart, and even a few people with just F-Zero on one console. And it's not like it's abnormal for Nintendo to test stuff like this either. They have done smaller releases to test the waters on whether people will want a larger game in a certain style before. Stuff like Wii Sports becoming a full series of games, or Mario All-Stars testing the waters of how terrible of a company they can get away with being. All of this evidence does paint a pretty decent picture of a world where we could be seeing an F-Zero in a couple of years, assuming this test goes well, which does appear to be the case with how many people are enjoying it. But there's two sides to every shitty Nintendo discussion, so let's move on to the other side of the argument. Like before, we'll start with the smaller arguments against getting another F-Zero game. First of all, we have had plenty of supposed game revivals before, and they haven't always been revivals. Nintendo does just like remembering they have IPs sometimes. Like my parents, but with children. So the existence of a game does not mean that we are getting more games. Kid Icarus Uprising was considered to be one of the biggest and coolest revivals in years, and that series is 6 feet under yet again. And Uprising was a full game, but F-Zero 99 is just a recycled idea that would be $5 if it wasn't on Nintendo Switch Online. Moving on to another argument, there's also the very small issue that if they wanted to hype up F-Zero, they could have put Captain Falcon in the Mario Kart DLC, but he's oddly missing. Another issue is the 99 series game has never led to another game in a series. Tetris, Mario, and Pac-Man are all standalone games, so it could be that this was just a standalone idea. Which directly leads into the next issue. Miyamoto did directly state that they would make a new F-Zero if they had a new idea. And this is a new idea. And this could very easily be the only new idea that they have. This just so happens to be the only idea they've managed to come up with for F-Zero in 2 decades, and that's why they made it. They didn't have any other reason. F-Zero 99 doesn't mean F-Zero is coming back. It only means that they finally had an idea and they decided to throw the F-Zero fans a bone with a game that is free for most Switch owners. And there probably isn't that many people who had to pay for it. If you're a die-hard Nintendo fan who cares about F-Zero, you probably already have Switch Online. So the only people who probably care about F-Zero already have it. And because of that, this game probably barely created a couple extra Switch Online subscribers, which isn't gonna look good to Nintendo if this is them testing the waters. They could very easily think that no one really wants F-Zero and it's just the already die-hard Nintendo fans that want a new F-Zero game, which is gonna make them not want to create another game. And with all of this, I think the evidence that we won't get a new F-Zero is way stronger than the evidence that we will. Sure, there is hope, which is more hope than we've had in years, but it just doesn't feel like enough. From a surface level, sure, you can see all of this nice evidence that makes it look like we could get it. But when you look a little deeper at all of the interviews and reasons given for the game drought and the most likely reasons F-Zero 99 was created, it just doesn't add up. This is the new idea that they were talking about having someday, no matter how underwhelming it may seem. And the Mario Kart problem is basically unsolvable. No matter what, they're gonna release another Mario Kart, and it's gonna end up taking up the Nintendo racing game market space. And honestly, it could be even worse than that.
I've been up all night, but I think I've finally figured out how to... It's worse than I thought.
So both of F-Zero's problems are either unlikely to be solved or just can't be solved. Honestly, there just isn't really a path forward for the series. But there is one major factor that we've ignored up to this point.
The love of God?
You see, Nintendo has always had this perception of being a company of old men who don't understand the often younger demographic of gamers and, most importantly, their own fans. They seem to brush off the things the younger people / fans want in favor of doing what they want to do, just like your grandparents at family gatherings.
You know how it is. You're having fun at a family gathering until Grandpa pulls you over into the other room and you're like, "What's going on, Grandpa?" And then you look down and you're like,
Like your grandpa sometimes, there's just one way that they want to make the game, and they do it no matter what. Sometimes it can feel like just an endless pattern of being disappointed by their decisions. However, ever since the Switch began, the pattern has started to break. It's not always, but sometimes instead of plugging their ears to what the fans want and doing what they want instead, they seem to make decisions that do nothing but please the fans. Even when it may not seem like the best way to spend their time and resources, or more importantly, when it goes against innovation for innovation's sake. They do it anyway because they understand that pleasing fans is the way they make more money, especially in the long term. Stuff like Ridley being in Smash. And even though they were right, and he does look a bit awkward, with many of his attacks looking stilted in one way or another, they still gave him to us anyway, because that's what we wanted. They gave us the regular Mario Party style, completely going against their insatiable will to innovate at every turn, no matter how bad an idea they might have.
Well, I mean, we don't need to drive the car. We could have 4 people push it instead.
And even recently, they just gave us Paper Mario the 1,000-Year Door remake, which is a style of game they have been adamant about not being what they want for the Paper Mario series. They have made game after game going against this idea, and the fans kept asking for them to go back to making it like the old games, and instead of sitting down and being stubborn about it, they gave up on these new ideas and gave fans the Paper Mario that they really wanted. These examples aren't it either. They gave us open world 3D Mario, Pokemon Snap, Mario Strikers, more insane Smash Bros. Characters, open world Pokemon, 3D Kirby, most of Earthbound, and even a Dunsparce Evolution. Time and time again, they've shown that they value what the fans want, and I think this is the best possible news for F-Zero. A new F-Zero game ranks among Mother 3 coming to the West in terms of level of being requested. And Nintendo would literally explode if they gave Mother 3 to the West, so we can't get that.
America hates Mother. They hate Mother. They hate Mother. They hate Mother. America hates Mother. They don't want Mother 3. America hates it.
But F-Zero doesn't have any holdups like that. It really is just problems that arose from the unfortunate circumstances F-Zero found itself in. And while these 2 problems that they've had for so long would stop someone from creating an F-Zero game from a business standpoint, Nintendo does want to please the fans at the end of the day. It not only helps make and keep long-term fans, but it covers the terrible way they treat them half the time. And an F-Zero game is one of the final long-standing big fan requests, so this is the perfect game to release right when they lock up another person for loving their games. And the fact that they're paying any attention to it at all, I think proves that they know what the fans want and are getting ready to give them exactly that. Which means that it's finally time to repair this car and get this baby on the road.
This fine has been issued by the state of Utah. You have been found guilty of causing a public disturbance and careless driving. The report from the cop states he was observed speeding around town, filming himself, shouting, "Show me your moves," at every woman he saw. Bro, fuck this cop. I was shouting it at men too.